Okay, so this is going to be a special episode.
Hi.
Of the responding to video. I'm not sure we're actually responding to this. We're more or less reacting to it. But you're a biology major, so...
I am.
So yeah. you probably are responding to it.
I will be. That's the hope. Hopefully I'm smart enough to,
right.
Aren't you going to introduce me?
Of course. This is my girlfriend, Emily.
Hi, I'm girlfriend. Nice to meet you.
And, we found an interesting video asking us whether or not skinwalkers are real.
They're not, but it's okay.
Let's check it out.
Some claim the uncanny valley instinct exists to make us be cautious around corpses. That's partly true. But it's really a defense mechanism against things pretending to be human.
I like the setup premise.
It's pretty creepy. It
is pretty creepy.
A little lamp shading of like, what's this? But it's also this other thing.
Right. You know, like, there's always like an element for the vast majority of like these what ifs where I always want to be like, but what if it's true? Like,
couldn't be me.
Like, if there's like a 1% chance it's true, do we not owe it to like, at the very least, think about it?
I mean, let's get into the video more, but I feel
right.
like I have thoughts on this, so.
Right. The concern here is that other animals don't have it.
Right. Yeah.
Which means that humans had to have evolved it.
Right.
So, like, exactly what sort of environmental pressures would make knowing the uncanny valley, like, especially in, like, 100,000 years ago, like, what environmental pressures could possibly result in that?
Mm-hmm.
Green text stories about strange and uncanny things are all over the internet and /x/. Skinwalkers, shapeshifters, and human-like cryptid.
So this image is actually from a movie,
okay.
By the way.
Thank goodness.
Like, I know for a fact it's from a movie. I looked up the thing for this. So, while everyone likes to use this for, like, look at this strange this is from a movie.
Yeah,
I know this for a fact.
Cryptids are so omnipresent in all spooky online forums that they are practically a meme at this point.
That's super creepy.
And yet, they are nevertheless extremely creepy and spooky.
Uh-huh.
Why is that? Skinwalkers, creepypastas, and images like this one are terrifying.
No.
They instill in us a fear and dread, a feeling that something is...
Are you scared of this?
I wouldn't say happy is the prevailing emotion here, but I don't think that it's as scary as the other one.
Yeah, it's not creepy.
It's not quite right.
It's not making me go...
This
phenomenon,
one
I hate. I hate this one so... Why would you pause it on that?
When we are presented with images of a human-like figure that is nonetheless not quite human, is called the uncanniness, and was first described by Sigmund Freud in his 1919 essay Das Unheimlich, The Uncanny. In this work, Freud attempts to uncover the origin of this word, as well as nail down what sort of imagery instills in us that feeling of dread and fright. He defines the uncanny as that which is familiar, and yet the opposite of familiar. In this paradoxical situation, we feel an innate despair and inner...
So what we're seeing here is, like, in these images, is, like, maybe not with, like, the dog one and, like, the weird, like, tetrapedal weird thing with the weird backbone, but... Like, what we're seeing here is, like, it's like robots and mannequins and, like, whatever the heck this is just, like, yeah, like, it's very close to being human, but it's not, right? And it's this, like, instinctual reaction. And so I think that, as they said at the beginning of the video, the kind of prevailing theory for why the uncanny valley exists is to keep us away from corpses. I'm not, like, sure how much I believe it, just because, I don't know, I feel like corpses, when they go through... decomposition stop looking human pretty fast, but
so my problem with the corpse's explanation, and If it's not clear, this is sort of a somewhat pro, definitely con perspective.
Even though I don't buy the corpses thing, I definitely also don't buy what they're selling in this video. But yeah.
I like to be a bit of a conspiracy nut, even if I know better. So.
Yeah, we'll get you a tinfoil kipo one of these days.
Yeah. Yeah, a tinfoil kippot. The problem, I think, with the dead bodies explanation is that only humans have that. You'd think that if it were for dead bodies, that other apes, at the very least, would also have that reaction. But they don't. And so, to me, it just seems odd that this would that for dead bodies, it would exclusively evolve in humans.
Right, like, it's not a bad hypothesis, right? Like, there are plenty of reasons not to go near dead bodies, right? Like, dead bodies indicate, well, like, something killed that person, right? So it could be, like, a dangerous predator, it could be a disease, it could be some kind of infectious agent, right? And so, like, staying away from a corpse is, like, generally a good idea. But, like, it just doesn't fit the data, really.
Right. So like, suggesting that a secret, like, fake human exists, like, where are the fossils? Where are the nests and stuff?
Yeah.
And that would be, like, the flip side of this argument, like, where's the hard empirical evidence?
Right, yeah.
Dread. In the technological age, with the advent of robots and human-like machinery, this concept was expanded into that of the uncanny valley, which is normally represented by a chart plotting the humanness of an image with its perceived likableness. There is a sharp decline in empathy as the human likeness increases, which forms the shape of a...
Yeah, I know it does put corpse in
which is probably, like, it's probably a function of the graph rather than maybe, I don't know about the data that this graph came from, but it could be intentional that they're like, oh, because they follow the corpse hypothesis, or whatever.
I like how stuffed animals are on here.
Yeah. yeah.
The valley, hence the phenomenon's name. Examples of the uncanny valley can be found all over the internet.
What the hell even is this?
It looks like a robot.
It looks like a robot trying to figure out, like...
It looks like a robot with, like, some kind of anatomical dressing on it that is spasming, I guess.
Robotics, 3D computer animations, and lifelike dolls, as well as video games and virtual reality can all elicit this cold and eerie feeling in its viewers. Outside of technology, some of the most common childhood fears are of clowns, people wearing masks.
I don't think this triggers the uncanny valley.
Yeah, this is
just creepy.
It's just scary, right? Like this is something else, right? This isn't something that looks human almost. This is just like you can't see their face, like they're dressed up weird. Like this is
black and white.
This is just unfamiliar.
Yeah, this is
unfamiliar. The graphics in this video are definitely like
not helping.
They're scary. Like don't get me wrong, like I'm being got here, but like yeah, that doesn't really
and
go
strange
to the main
dolls.
Point.
All of these relate to the uncanny valley and its reality as a psychological phenomenon. And yet, there is still no scientific consensus as to why the uncanny valley arises. Most theories agree that it comes from some sort of cognitive dissonance, as some parts of the brain affirm that the image seems to be a human, but others emit warning signals because of incorrect proportions or features. This lack of consensus within the brain is theorized to...
That's Uncanny Valley.
That's Uncanny Valley. Yeah, and I mean, so that's a pretty good explanation. I don't know, like, psychology isn't kind of my area of expertise, but the cognitive dissonance as a mechanism, right, not necessarily as, like, an explanation, like, why do we have this cognitive dissonance, per se? It's a pretty good reason, right? Why would this cognitive dissonance elicit such a strong reaction? Like,
why
that's
would this
the question.
cognitive dissonance exist exclusively in humans? And this is, I know I keep coming back to this, but I think it is an important point that, like, we share DNA and therefore a section of our psychology with, like, chimpanzees. Like, chimpanzees have 99% of our DNA.
Right.
You would think that they too would react like creeped out. Like, you'd think that they would have somewhat on the same level, the same sort of selection pressures that would cause them to have the same somewhat psychological effects that occur in the brain at the very least.
I mean, I wonder if we've ever tested them. It could just be an example of selection bias, right? Where it's like, we experience this phenomena, and so therefore we test it. Like, I don't know if we've ever, like,
tested whether or not
put a monkey chimp in front of a chimpanzee and like measured its cortisol or whatever, you know.
Right.
So
right.
It could be an example.
I'll put a link into the description if I find anything.
Yeah.
Like chimpanzee Uncanny Valley. But like I'd be curious to see if any other ape does this.
Yeah.
Because if it does, that in my opinion that would be a big nail in the coffin to this theory.
Right. Yeah.
But right now, just operating with what I don't, as far as I know, other apes don't.
Right.
So,
yeah.
like, you know...
Cause the uncanny feeling.
Keeps a level of plausibility.
But this theory is not without its flaws, and most other examples of cognitive dissonance lead only to some mild frustration or confusion, not
Yeah,
a
like
cold
what I was
and
saying.
eerie fear that is elicited by images of this sort.
Valley.
Yeah, I hate that.
There must be some other...
I think this person's name is... something Saint Germain.
Wait, that's a person, not a mask?
That's a person.
Don't do cosmetic surgery, kids.
Yeah, I think they're heavily cosmetic surgery.
I wouldn't be surprised if this photo is also edited.
reason for this deeply rooted fear to
No,
have
it's
evolved
not.
in the
That's
human
that's
species.
their actual face.
Why would such a thing evolve? Well,
I
fear
said
can
both
be of
that's
two
their
types,
actual face.
inherited or acquired, the latter coming from psychological imprints a person has acquired during their lifetime. For example, if someone was stung by bees while very young, they may have an innate fear of bees or flying insects, even if they do not remember being stung. Obviously, this does not explain our fear of the uncanny, since most people have never been exposed to a situation which would leave such a psychological imprint.
I mean, okay, I kind of disagree with this. So, because the thing is right, like, with our brains, we're constantly trying to, like, synthesize and categorize information, right? Like, our brains are really good at looking at things and categorizing them. And so, like, when you're a kid, right, like, a lot of things are unknown. And so, like, part of childhood development is, like, assessing a situation and then taking all the aspects of it and chopping it up and, like, dissecting it, right? So, like,
Right.
there is steam coming from the stove. What's a stove? I don't really know, but, like, this looks cool, and so therefore I'm gonna touch it. Uh-oh, I burned my hand, right? So, like, a
Right.
couple things is, like, stove means hot, but, like, steam, you know, later, like, you know, you take this information and you kind of synthesize it over, like, exposure, right?
Right.
And so,
right.
a lack of categorization or that cognitive dissonance that was talked about earlier, right? Like, that's an experience that we've all had, and I don't necessarily think that there's, like, no exposure of things. Like, we've all had this experience where we, like, think it's our mom, and then we look up and it's not our mom, you know? So, like, this kind of combination of familiar and unfamiliar can be, like, pretty, like, primal, I think, and also, like, it may not be a literal experience of, like, we have encountered something that looks human but doesn't, like, seem human, you know? I don't think that literally needs to happen for us to be nervous or afraid or unsettled of things that we don't understand. So
Right.
I
It could
kind of disagree here, yeah.
It could also be a product of human intelligence.
Right, also.
Like,
yeah.
human intelligence is, like, the human brain is so smart for itself that it will concoct a myth in its head to suggest that there are fake humans because it's just that smart where it's like, well, what if there are other things like me out there?
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, in our culture,
Hate that.
we are normally conditioned to like dolls and
Whatever.
clowns and the like, but many still have an innate fear of these things. So, this phobia must have been inherited from our ancestors, who acquired it because being afraid of not quite human
my
things
way to
had an
steal your
evolutionary advantage. What if there was some creature in the wild which mimicked human appearance and mannerisms, trying to gain the trust of unsuspecting victims in order to hunt them?
Yeah. Okay.
Upon initial analysis,
So,
Thi-
this is where I and Josh start to fight a little bit. Because the thing is like, you have to, like, the burden of proof here is, like, you can't take a psychological phenomenon with, like, 12 other explanations and be like, this suggests that,
Right.
like,
Okay.
there's some other gigantic humanoid, right? Like, so, like, I mean, also, like, in North America, right, like, we have, like, settled and deforested a lot of the land, right? So, like, you mean to tell me that, like, we have not found some kind of, like, large fauna, like, no droppings, no nests, no settlements, no bones, right? Because you can't tell me that, like, none of these things have ever died of old age and just, like, died in a bush, right? Like, so there's absolutely no physical evidence that this kind of thing exists, and considering how long North America has like been occupied for and how like extensive its development has been, like I would be extremely shocked if tomorrow like a scientist or like somebody discovered like this new like
Hominoid,
large this new large animal of any kind, right? Like we're kind of at the level here where like, you know, save maybe like not even Antarctica really. It's like all the new organisms that we're finding are like microbes and bugs, right? Like small stuff.
So I guess I'll start my preemptive counter with
go for it.
I fully agree with the sentiment that there needs to be empirical evidence. So it's not like I'm like pushing that to the side because that's just right. That's just correct. The thing is that when it comes to like the acquisition of settlements, droppings, and even bodies, right? If we take this theory to its full breadth, and I'm not saying we should, okay, because there's even a part of me that's like saying that we shouldn't. You know, what if they test to be like humans? What if they're confused for a human body? Like, you know, if they're virtually indistinguishable from us, minus uncanny features that I guess like a coroner wouldn't really give a shit about when they're like taking the I'll have to bleep that. Oops. Don't really care about when they're just like taking a look at the body. You know, I guess it could be plausible, and again, that's along the side of the if. So we're already two dimensions of if into this.
We're pretty far in, yeah. Okay.
That like, you know, if you found an unidentified body in the woods, and it is one of these things, and they're indistinguishable from us, no one's reporting a new species because of that.
Yeah, you would still expect to see some kind of morphological differences, and I feel like they talk about like it's not just we'll see.
Right, but there is a valid point here that like, you know, there are like 12 other explanations that come in line before this one.
Right. Yeah.
This one just is the most fun in my opinion.
This seems quite far-fetched. But relationships of this kind exist in many different instances across nature. There are numerous parasitic insects.
See, but I find this is why I find that compelling. Like,
hold on, let him explain it a little more.
Right, sure.
For example, whose only way of getting food is to mimic the behavior of other insects, normally social insects like ants of bees, and then either infiltrate the hive nest to gain access to food supplies, or lures out unsuspecting individuals to eat them. Obviously, none of the victims notice until it was already too late. Such a creature's existence would be elusive and unverifiable.
So
me at 2 a.m. with the boys.
So, like, that is true. This aggressive mimicry is something that occurs in the animal kingdom. And so I guess really where my contention is that if it occurs in bugs, can it occur elsewhere? If the answer is no, then I guess this theory's kind of donezo.
Yeah,
If the answer is yes, then there is the smallest chance that it could be true.
So as far as I know, no, it doesn't happen anywhere other than insects. I could be wrong. I might be wrong. But the thing is that another problem with this hypothesis is that it's kind of like this weird damned if you do, damned if you don't with the... Is that believable?
No.
Hecked if you do, hecked if you don't. Where, like, it's either unique to humans and it's like, ooh, creepy, or it's like not unique to humans and it's like, okay, on the one hand, you know, like, why is it special to humans? Skinwalkers. On the other hand, it's like, oh, well, it not being unique to humans provides like this piece of evidence that it could actually be plausible. But as far as I know, like, nothing of this scale occurs on a large organismal scale. Like, we do have parasites and things, but no parasite that I know of can like exert some kind of like psychological or psychic control on humans in terms of like making them like predationary.
So what about this counterpoint then? What if the only reason why it would occur with humans, and that's the third dimension of if, so that it occurs because of hominid intelligence.
Just because we're so smart that we're like, what if?
Well, no, like, so say like a deviant hominid species like split off from us, long enough to where they're a different species, but not long enough to where they might look like us, and they're intelligent enough to speak, say things, and so they hunt other hominids like us. And so the only reason why this is possible for a species like us is specifically because hominids are very intelligent.
Also highly implausible. I mean, the fact that, like, there would have to be no noticeable morphological differences if we're being extremely generous. Like, let's say that, like, the tissue is different. Like, no morphological differences just in the bones. Let's say just in the bones, right? That's pretty unlikely. You have no significant DNA evidence, right? Like, if you have corpses in the woods, they might test their DNA to try and, like, find their, no differences in teeth, right? It's highly unlikely that you would have this, like, co-evolving hominid species that we have no proof of. And, like, also considering, like, the breadth and depth of diversity, like, within human populations, that, like, every single one of these hominids is, like, this super sneaky, like, human hunter. I think it's pretty unlikely, so.
Okay.
Just like the unsuspecting insects, any human who got close enough to the creature to know of its existence would be promptly eaten. The few who survived encounters would tell stories of shape-shifting.
This is also from a movie, obviously.
Right.
I don't remember whether or not this is... I think this is actually from the short film, not the actual movie. This is from the VHS The Siren
okay.
short.
I recognize it, yeah.
Yeah. I recognize it at least.
Witches or shamans or try to explain the occurrence with their tribal knowledge. And as we all know, there are many legends in Native American mythology of shape-shifting witches or animals, called skinwalkers, or fleshgates, who have the ability to turn into or disguise themselves as any animal they wish, including humans.
Let's get a note thread going. I'll start. Be 16. Be living in backwoods of South Carolina. Hear stories from local kids of creepy stuff happening in forest about 2 miles from my new house. Decide to check it out, can't be that scary, right? Grab pistol, knife, and flashlight and head out into dense forest. Starts getting dark, turn on flashlight. Heavy fog all of a sudden rolls in, bringing the smell of copper and burnt hair. Hairs on back of neck start to stand on end. Start hearing whispers and giggles. Hear something running around in woods near me. Hear it get louder. No, closer. Turn around to see something crawling extremely fast low to the ground on 4 legs, but seem to have arms and legs like human. Fire a shot right into its back, and can see blood splatter and gunshot wound. Lets out a blood-curdling screech and retreats into woods. Fog lifts and smell suddenly goes away. Nope. Betamax all the way home. Get home and there it is, right in my driveway. Runs towards me, and I shoot at it, but the bullet doesn't fire. I'm guessing it was a dud. It jumps up and all I can see is its huge white eyes. Blackout. And wake up on top of Dad's car with Dad over me trying to wake me up. My head hurts like a bitch, and my ears are ringing. Tell Dad about what happened in woods and he just laughs. And tells me it was nothing. All goes normal for about another 3 hours when Dad says, "Hey Jake, mind getting me those steaks out of the fridge?" I just look at him and say, "Dad, my name is Anon, not Jake." Just looks at me like he is full of hatred directed towards me. Give him steaks and he just goes into his room with them. Uncooked, comes out an hour later with the package and throws it away. I don't even think about asking. At 11 o'clock p.m. he tells me to go to bed, which is odd, because it is a Friday and he doesn't usually care when I stay up. But I do as told and go into my room. At around 3:15 my door opens. It's my dad. I say nothing and pretend to be asleep. That smell of copper returns to the air, and I feel sick to my stomach. My dad sits on the edge of my bed and just looks at me for what I would say to be about 30 minutes. He then mumbles something under his breath, and a voice I didn't recognize. My blood turned cold and I just laid there. When he got up and left, my heart dropped and I just laid there until morning. The next morning I wake up and my dad is asleep on his lazy boy recline and his nose is bleeding. I wake him up and I'm still spooked. I ask him about the blood and he has no idea where it came from. I ask him about the night before and he has no idea what I'm talking about, and he doesn't remember waking me up either. My heart drops when he states that it was still Friday, when I know for a fact that it is Saturday. But he argues with me until I show him my phone with the date. At this point we are both freaked. I've never ventured out into the woods since then, and nothing strange has happened since then, except sometimes I will hear the...
So, here's my thoughts on this. So I don't want to discredit anybody's experience, right? Like, anybody's personal experience of, like, you experienced this thing. Obviously, I can't speak to that. However, we do know that, like, the mind is very, very, like...
Fickle.
Yeah, it's very fickle. It's very easily manipulated. To the point where so the way that it works, right, is that when you recall a memory, it's kind of like you bring it out of your brain, and when you put it back, you don't put the memory back. You put back your memory of the memory. So it's like, if I, have a picture, I take the picture out, I photocopy the picture, and I put the photocopy back in my brain instead of the original, right? So there's no... your memory, like, eyewitness testimony alone isn't accepted and, isn't seen as, super reliable in court anymore. They did this study once where they, like, arrested people, and interrogated them about this crime that they definitely didn't commit, but it got to the point where, like, due to this interrogation, like, the people genuinely believed that they committed, like, they gaslit them into, like, believing it. So your memories are, like, super fickle. So my kind of personal take on this is that, like, if you're on the internet, right, you have seen creepy stories, you hear more creepy stories from locals, right?
Right.
Combine that with the fact, so you're kind of psychologically primed, right?
Right.
Combine that with the fact that, like, it's dark and everything is amplified in the woods when it's dark, right? Like, you can think that it sounds like a bear, but it's a raccoon 20 feet away, it's dark, you have a flashlight, it's probably some kind of wildlife, like a wolf or something, or a coyote, and, like, through adrenaline, like, psychological priming, and, like, poor recall, like, you get pretty messed up. This doesn't really, like, explain the second half with the dad, but, like, notwithstanding that this could be made up for, like, internet clout.
Right.
Because that's always a possibility. Like, when he goes to sleep, it could just be, like, sleep paralysis. So, like, the time losing, like, that's odd. Like, there are certain elements, like, it doesn't perfectly explain everything, but, I mean, yeah, like, you can kind of have this and especially if it's been a long time, like, you kind of trick yourself, so it's not, like, this super reliable thing that's been preserved. Every time you kind of take it out, you fiddle with it a little bit, even unintentionally, before you put it back. So, and it's, like, psychological priming is, like, for instance, like, sometimes, like, children claim to have, like, prescient dreams, right? Like, dreams that tell the future, but they're almost after, like, it's like a way of coping with difficult events, right? They say, oh, I had a dream about it, but it's like they didn't. They just experienced it, and then they kind of reimagined it as having a dream before it happened. So your memory and your recollection isn't actually that reliable in terms of, like, specific details and things. And so just considering that and, like, the nature of being in the woods at night, like, I'm not super convinced by this. So
right. Well, I mean, I wouldn't be convinced by a singular story either.
Yeah.
I have nothing else to add to it other than that.
The front door opened and shut a few times during the night.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Most reports of skinwalkers on /x/ come in the form of green text stories, and they tend to follow the same sort of progression. First, a person or a group of people go camping in the woods of North America. When night falls, spooky things begin to happen. Most stories talk about a distinctive stench of rotten flesh, burning hair, and copper, which marks the coming of the Skinwalker.
Right. So this isn't, like, necessarily mystical, right? Like, rotten flesh, that's a pretty normal thing to see out in the wilderness. Like, the burning hair, maybe a little more interesting, like, a little more unexplainable, but if you're, like, have a fire, for instance, and you put, like, the wrong kind of moss in, right, that could account for the smell. And, like, spooky sounds and things, you know, like, and the stench of copper is pretty analogous to the scent of blood.
Right.
So none of these things are, like, super abnormal, and also, like, again, as I said, kind of like the psychological priming of, like, other people experienced it this way, and so...
Like if you're out in the woods, like, say we're out in the woods, and I suddenly smell, like, copper.
Right.
I'm more primed to believe I'm about to encounter a Skinwalker, even if it's not really a Skinwalker.
Right.
Right.
Or you encounter something odd, and you are more likely to notice. It's like a confirmation bias. Like, you're looking out for it, you know. So, again, so common threads that aren't necessarily unexplainable by other theories.
If the campers are lucky and manage to stay together, they can flee from the encounter intact, maybe after firing some shots at the creature and hearing a guttural scream. Otherwise, if someone becomes separated from the group, they are taken by the Skinwalker, who proceeds to disguise itself as that person. The creature then tries to return to camp, impersonating the lost individual. It may repeat phrases that it had heard that person say, or just stay still, staring at the flames of a campfire. Sometimes the Skinwalker becomes that individual for some time, even returning to civilization with the rest of the group, as the aforementioned story. Sometimes the person goes missing afterwards, but other times the real individual may return after a while. Many stories also showcase paranormal or supernatural occurrences, with people losing track of time or having multiple different timelines of the same events. But the universally recurring theme is that there is a creature that lives in the woods of North America and stalks down human beings, hunting them down, taking on their bodies, and then returning to the shadows.
Yeah, so this is where this video kind of starts to, like, leave from, like, oh, this is, like, a scientifically plausible hypothesis, right? Like, once we get into the, I'm taking your form and I'm mimicking your voice, that's where I'm like, okay. Like, hypothetically speaking, if we had the evidence, I'd be like, okay, like, maybe we have a hominid, like predator, but...
A predatorial hominid who hunts other hominids.
You can't have that kind of morphological, or, like, maybe a human could do it with the voice, like, maybe a human could do the voice, but you can't...
Well, so I don't want to be that guy.
Do it, be that guy.
But... since I'm taking on a pro position, I have to be that guy.
Please do.
What if it's not something scientific? What if it's something supernatural?
I mean, okay, sure, but, like...
Yeah, it would still be on you to prove it, I know that.
It would still be on you to prove it, yeah.
I know that.
I mean, like, I'm not gonna say that, like, there's no reason why... Like, that it's absolutely could not be true. But, like, I would have to see... Like, there would have to be phenomena that would be truly inexplicable with any other hypothesis, right? Like...
For it to reduce down into
right,
this.
Because, like, we have some common elements that can be, like, physiological reactions, like memory distortions, just lying for internet clout, right? Purposely trying to be scary, right? Like, nothing about these nothing about the unexplained phenomena specifically makes me be like, okay, maybe this actually is, like, supernatural.
Right.
So I'm, like, obviously I'm not gonna disagree with you on principle, but, like...
Right. I think it's a sort of a dishonest trap coming from me, though, because...
You can go ahead and believe that, sweetie. Yeah, good for you. Yeah, work that brain out for... Yeah.
Never to be seen again. From the few reports we have of such a creature's appearance, it is usually stated to be humanoid in shape, taller than a normal human, with height ranging from 7 to 12 feet. Its body is hairless, its limbs elongated, and it has a human-like yet featureless face. The eyes are tiny and sunken, like black dots, and the creature's mouth and sharp, blade-like teeth are arranged in a terrifying smile. One interesting green text in particular shows an Anon who claims to know how to attract Skinwalkers. In it are incredibly detailed instructions on some sort of ritual to be performed in the woods in order to lure in the creatures.
Yeah.
A cat or dog is to be used as bait.
Right. So, but, internet folklore is fun.
Oh, it's very fun. I'm not gonna lie that I'm not scared by this. Like, this is scary, but do I believe that it's true? Absolutely.
No, and this is the one part of the video where I was like, okay, so this gentleman got attracting a skinwalker down to like a science where he's like, this is how you attract one.
Right.
But he never like got like a camera picture of it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where like my brain always goes like, okay, you're capable of doing one but not the other. Like,
also, what I forgot to mention earlier when he was talking about the disappearances is that if you overlay the map of like disappearances in the United States with cave systems in the United States, it's a very close 1-to-1, right? So a lot of your disappearances in the woods, it's not some kind of like hellscape portal or like being eaten by a skinwalker, like. If you and your buddies are camping out in the backwoods and something happens and you're scared and you get separated, like, maybe, and you never see your buddy again, like, maybe they fell in a cave. And, like, that's super morbid, but
it's plausible.
But it's not a skinwalker, so,
plausible.
That's another, like, yeah. So.
Right.
The instructions insist that throughout the whole process one should never make a sound or move, let alone open the tent to see what's outside.
Yeah.
Right, why summon a skinwalker if you can't look outside? It doesn't make any sense.
Because, like, I had this conversation, or a conversation like this with ghosts, because, like, it's difficult to not talk about paranormal stuff and, like, have a supernatural belief, because, like, so, like, big floods, parting waters, and resurrecting Jews are all on the table, but, like...
But ghosts?
Ghosts aren't.
Ooh.
And I'm sorry if anyone in my audience gets offended by that sentiment, but I think it is a valid point. And so, like... But, like, one of the things that I'll always tell my friends is, like, how come no one's ever tried to, like, catch a ghost? You always hear people like, no, don't touch it, don't do anything. If I saw a ghost, I'd, like, try tackling the thing. Like,
right. Well, I mean, and you have paranormal investigator shows, which they make the whole point out of,
which are
talking to it or what. You know, it's like
they're so sensationalist.
Yeah, like there's a difference between like, obviously, like some things may be phenomenological, and so therefore like can't be captured or can't be detected. But it's like, if ghosts are like this, like I think the difference between like angels and demons and like ghosts and things is that people are like, oh well, like people trying to apply these rules to ghosts, like ghosts appear here and you can detect them with this kind of equipment, and it's like there are all these rules, and it's like if there are rules, you should expect that you should be able to catch them, and if not, it's like anything that kind of claims to follow the rules you can kind of immediately be a little skeptical of, because it's like, well, if ghosts always do X, then if nobody's ever done Y to, like, get a picture of it, it's actually, like, good or whatever, so.
Right, so, and that succinctly applies to this. Like, if I can't leave my tent to take a look at it, like, why not set a camera outside?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
The poster claims he got the information from a now-forgotten online forum, and that he had tried to technique with his friend when they were younger. According to the Anon,
put it this way, he tried opening the tent. I cowered like a pussy. I'm still here. He went missing almost 20 years ago now.
So I think this guy just murdered his friend. I think he just murdered his friend. Anyway.
The Uncanny Valley as an evolutionary defense mechanism has proven to be quite an interesting and spooky theory. Some other contending theories include that it is a form of protection against dead or diseased bodies, or maybe even against other human species, when Neanderthals and the like still walked the earth some tens of...
See, but this is where, like, the whole hominid thing becomes attractive. Like, if a predator hominid evolved and it only hunted hominids, we wouldn't be its only food source.
Right.
Or at least nowadays we
Or, like,
are.
why isn't some kind of analogous predator also feeding off of, like, you know, apes or whatever? I mean, part of it is, like, what we see is that, like, in terms of, like, co-evolutionary arms races, right? When you have one organism that's preying on another, and so this, like, the prey species will, you know, acquire an adaptation to, like, outsmart the predator, and then the predator will, you know, acquire a counter adaptation, and so on and so forth. Those are species that aren't, like, similar morphologically, right? You have,
right, typically,
you know,
or typically they're not, yeah.
Right, like, you have your gazelles and your cheetahs, right?
Right.
Like, it's not like there's a cheetah and then there's, like, an evil predator cheetah, right? Like, they're very
That's
different.
like hunting other cheetahs.
Right, they're very different. Because it's like, yeah, like, your arms race, which is actually what it's called, by the way. It's your co-evolutionary arms race, which I think is a very good metaphor.
Very, very cool, yeah.
Yeah,
but I think someone who's, like, really deep into this, who like, no, not me, but someone who's really deep, they would say, like, well, they're already at the highest point of evolution, aren't they? Humans are pretty evolved.
okay, so that's a totally stupid... That's a misconception. Let's put it that way. So there's no, like, relative levels of evolution is actually, like, a very common misconception about the concept of evolution, right? There's not higher and lower forms.
From what I understand, it's always happening.
Right, well,
Yeah,
and there's
right.
better adapted and less adapted, right? So
Right.
if I'm in this, like, niche where it's, like, if you swapped me in a whale, like, that would be very bad, right? So, like, even though I'm more evolved than a whale, if you swapped me in a whale, like, if you put me in a whale's habitat, like, I would die.
You would die.
Yeah, I'm like, I can't swim for long periods of time. I can't strain plankton through my teeth, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's about fitting into a niche. It's about acquiring traits in an entire population, right? Because individuals don't evolve either, right? You can adapt to things, but you can't evolve. It's about, as a population, acquiring traits that give you an advantage in a particular niche, right? Which is like an environment with certain conditions and things.
Right.
And so, like, yeah, I mean, I guess there's a niche for, like, an invisible hominid predator, but, like, if you wanted to prey on humans, there's better ways to do it, right? Like, we have seen better human predators over history. And so I don't think that, like, I mean, yeah, I just don't think that this kind of, like, silent, invisible, co-evolutionary enemy that we have literally no proof of other than, like, green text stories, I just really don't think that it's plausible, so.
Right.
Of thousands of years ago. Others claim it is simply a byproduct of our innate pattern recognition neural circuits malfunctioning when seeing unexpected features, similarly to when one sees a square with one side slightly smaller or larger. Whether any of these are true or not, we may never know. But the Skinwalker theory is definitely the spookiest, and it is also good
That's
food
true.
for thought.
No.
To
not
finish
that.
the video, here's a story of someone claiming to be a wildlife expert, exposing what he believes to be the truth about skinwalkers. I'm a trail guide and backpacker. Years and miles. Seen lots of shit.
Before we hear this one out, do we give them the benefit of the doubt that they're an actual trail guide? Okay.
Yeah.
I can't explain everything I've seen in the wild, but I can tell you this, you will see things out there that defy explanation and, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering about them. If you ever take word of caution, take this like your life depends on it. Don't go into the wild alone. Don't stray from your camp at night. Don't answer or seek out anything that calls you mysteriously in the night.
This is good advice.
Do not believe everything you see with your own eyes. I need to repeat that, like your life depends on it, do not believe things, especially out of place people, voices, or suspicious things that you see, even with your own eyes, especially when your gut and instincts are warning you.
Right. It's the trade-off between curiosity and safety, right? Because like curiosity is a very powerful instinct.
This is why an idiot like me can't like be in an environment like that, because I would be like, Skinwalker? Let's grab this rope and try and capture it. Meanwhile, it's digging my guts out.
Right, because the thing is like, people, like, yeah, as I said, like, humans are very good at pattern recognition, and, like, you, like, do have a sense of, like, is something right, is something wrong? And there's something that's, like, a little deeper than, like, your brain or your, like, anxiety, per se, because, like, if you have anxiety, you'll think things are wrong when they're not necessarily wrong. There's something, like, even a little deeper than that, and, like... It's a very subconscious thing, and like it's just like it's danger or no danger, and so it's like if you're hearing something that's out of place, right? You might want to go think about, like, go find out what it is, right? That's the curious part of our brains, but it's like you don't have your tribe. You know, you don't have a weapon per se. You're in the dark, so, you know, you're at a disadvantage, right? You're in this environment that you're not adapted to.
Right.
And so it's unwise, it's unsafe to investigate. And so that's, like, where that, like, feeling comes from, is because, like, even though you might be curious, it's this warning signal. So yeah, so don't be stupid in the woods, because, like, maybe it's a skinwalker, maybe it's a coyote that will tear your throat out, and maybe you're just being
panicky.
Well, because also in the absence of certain stimulation, after a while, like, the human brain will start to, like, hallucinate, like, auditorily or, like, visually, right? So you can trick yourself into seeing things and thinking things, and so maybe you just end up wandering in the woods and you get lost and you starve to death, or you fall into a cave, you know. So
right.
You know, I think the spooky take on this, like, that we're gonna get to here is, like, not correct, but, like, he is right, like, the author of this text, that it's like, yeah, like, being out in the woods, like, for long enough, like, you will see things. Don't be stupid and go after them. You know, I think that is reliable, at the very least.
Right.
There's something out there, something that scares grown men even like me, something we won't talk about, but it's real, has no consistent form, and it lures you. If you are a wild thing and a hunter of human beings, there's no better hunting ground than our busiest national and state parks. Note I said busiest. If you are a hunter of opportunity, then there's no better prey than the young, the weak, the old, the alone. There's something out there, so old, so skilled, so clever and cunning, not just a being but a species, that has or have developed a specialized survival skill, luring and preying on lost or solitary humans. Can a predator in the natural world lure, trap, summon or even hypnotize their prey? A quick Google search should yield you hundreds of examples of such species in the animal, fish, bird, and insect kingdoms.
Yeah, but, like, again, these predators aren't, like, literally the same, right? You have examples of...
Right, they're not like a one-to-one copy.
Yeah, they're not like a one-to-one.
Well, I mean, I guess he's not describing something that's a one-to-one copy. He's describing some sort of 12-foot shape-shifting monstrosity.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other thing about this video, is that it's like, okay, what is it? You know, is it exactly like a human but slightly off? Is it, like, way different than a human, but, like, yeah. So, anyway.
What I submit, if exists such a species, old as man, whose success depended on the successful hunting of humans, not only would it be very clever and good at it by now, but we'd have no record or memory of it in our history, just as no insect has probably ever survived an encounter with a trapdoor spider.
Yeah, but the levels
I
of
submit their hunting approach is case by case.
Yeah.
Their lure different depending on their human prey's age, strength, and size, but what I submit is that our oldest natural predator, an undiscovered predator, is still operating due to its skill of being able to read us like a book, hit us with lure, a lure I've distinctly recognized several times, particularly at night, just beyond the glow of the campfire, lead us into a trap, to never be seen or heard from again.
Another inconsistency with this video, right, is, like, it's either extremely primal, right, and like extremely well adapted, or it's extremely smart, right? And the thing is that if it's really that smart, right, if it has this adaptive hunting approach and it can like do all of these psychological games, it's like there has to be, if you're truly that smart and you're like some kind of analogous hominid, like you can't tell me that there's not a member of this population that isn't like a terrible bloodthirsty monster. You know, like you see diversity within like populations, human populations especially, but like animal populations as well, in terms of like personality, like group preferences, like in terms of like how they associate, like mating preferences. You can't tell me that there is one animal, like there's not a single being in this species that is like, even by like random mutation, is like, I'm gonna just screw around during the day, you know, like you can't. Yeah, and especially since humans are paranoid and mostly armed, you can't tell me that I've never killed, like that nobody's ever killed one. So
right,
it's a little bit of a, yeah, I think it's a trap, right? It's either so dumb that there's no way that we wouldn't have found it already, or it's so smart that it's like, okay, well, we should have found it already, you know? So.
Right. Nothing that smart can hide for long, just by the fruition of intelligence.
Like
and
if you think about it, right? Like if we found like a primitive, like think about like there's some like community on like an island in Africa or something, or maybe
North Sentinel Island.
North Sentinel Island,
yes.
Right? These people, like, they don't, like, in this example, obviously we're not like preying on them, but like they know that we exist, right? Like because we try and visit them.
Right.
Right?
Well, have tried.
We have tried.
We haven't tried in a while.
Good. Okay.
And they keep shooting everyone.
Right,
so.
because yeah. But it's like there are always going to be, and even though we know that if you go there you will die, people still try it, right? So yeah, even intelligent communities, especially intelligent communities, like there will be attempts at like connection and outreach, and you're either so smart that you hide all of your remains and we've never found one, or yeah. So anyway, we've kind of beat that one to death, but
right.
People, I submit a thing exists, something's out there, a species, that's not too unlike Stephen King's IT.
Yeah, I'm not saying that couldn't exist, but it's just very
tasted
unscientific
it,
with
smelled
what we
it.
have right now.
It's the smell of food when you're hungry, company when you're lonely, music where there should be none, beauty where there's danger. Nothing can explain the sensations, but deep down you'll feel it, in your gut. Something's not right. Something's waiting. Something's watching. Ask any man who's survived long enough alone in the wild. There's a siren-like hunter out there. It'll own you dead to rights, if you don't listen to your gut.
Creepy.
Anyways, that's it for this video. Thanks.
Yep. Final thoughts?
Final
Have I managed to unconvince you?
Well, the
thinks it's a no?
Sinaticus Apologia brand is all about trying to be as objective while trying to be as open-minded.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, from a supernatural perspective, and I'm gonna approach this from two different answers.
Okay.
Scientifically speaking, I have to agree with you. Like, there's... What else is there to be said there, right?
Right, there's nothing to be said.
There's nothing to be said there. That scientifically, I have to agree with you that there is just no evidence.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, the evidence presented in this video is just not compelling.
Right, it's not very compelling. Yeah.
Right. Fossil specimens would be great, droppings, trappings.
Yeah.
An actual photo.
Yeah.
I like, some of these things are doable, like an actual photo would be one of them. But from just sweeping that to the side from a supernatural perspective, I guess what I would really, really want to really kill this theory is a succinct, ironclad explanation for the Uncanny Valley effect.
Yep.
And that would be the thing that would make me go, okay, this is totally implausible then.
One more thing, one more kind of paradox is that, right, it's either so human that we're scared of it, or it's so inhuman that we can't recognize it, right? Like, because, obviously, like, I can't, like, science has its limits, and you can't prove that something doesn't exist, right? You can make a pretty darn strong case for it, but you can't prove. It only takes one negative example.
You can't disprove a negative. Right. That's like a philosophical issue.
So, like, I'm not gonna say that it can't be like some kind of mystical devil demon thing, right? But then it's like, if it's truly that mystical, then it kind of loses the it's like us but not quite, you know?
Right.
So,
right.
But
which is what makes it all spooky.
Right, which is make it all spooky. So as a scientist, as a biologist, like, this is total crap. As a person, this video scared the crap out of me. It scared the bejeetle juice out of me, so to speak. God, I hate that. So, mission failed, but mission also accomplished. So, yeah.
Sounds good. Well, I hope you enjoyed this special episode of Reacting To, and I will see you next time.